Hey, welcome back guys to Introduction to JavaScript course. Good to have you here. Last project was interesting, wasn't it? In this session, we will be working on project of similar nature. So who am I? I'm Kaustubh, but you can call me KG. We'll be working on this project together to understand the different concepts that we learned in session 3. So before we begin, let's look at the session outline. Firstly, we will cover the recap of what we did in the previous project and understand what we are going to do in this project. In this session, we will again visit on how to manipulate DOM, but we are going to be utilizing some very key concepts that we learned in the fundamentals of programming session. I believe that was session 3. We will explore JavaScript objects and classes and understand how we can use them in our projects. In the last session, we created a simple to-do list. We focused on getting the user inputted tasks and storing these tasks in the local storage. In this session, we're going to be doing something similar, but instead of storing one text at a time, we are going to be storing JavaScript object. So what is this project all about? So what we're doing is we're building a simple reading list. Let's look at the scope of the project to understand what we're trying to do. So we are going to be creating a simple HTML application that allows user to create two read lists. I'm sure you must be having a list of the books that you want to read and the books that you have covered thus far. We're going to be building application of similar sorts, but we'll be using very simple concepts of HTML and CSS, but a bit complex concepts from the JavaScript. So let's begin. Before we begin, make sure you have all the requirements satisfied. So in this case, make sure you have a Visual Studio Code editor installed on your computer, as well as a Google Chrome browser. You can find the project source code files on my GitHub page. You can download them, review them, and make changes to it as you see fit. So let's begin. Before beginning in the PowerPoint slides, let's go back and code directly onto the Visual Studio Code. Alright, I'm going to begin by creating a folder inside my projects folder. I'm going to call this books list. I'm going to open up this folder in Visual Studio Code. Again, we'll create two files like we did last time, one for writing all our HTML and one for writing the JavaScript. So I'm going to call the JavaScript file as main.js. Let me close this. Alright, so in the index.html file, we will start with just enough HTML to get us started. I will add bootstrap and we'll go from there. Alright, in here I'm going to be doing things a bit differently than we did last time. So in here I'm going to be using the actual form element, and for displaying the books, instead of using the unordered lists, we're going to be using tables. So how we may proceed. So let's create a container div first. I'm going to be using bootstrap classes. So container is a bootstrap class, and I'm going to be following the bootstrap structure or order for this project right from the beginning instead of from later. So I'll say div and I'll create a row. Inside of this, I'll create div of class column of small. Inside of this, I'm going to be creating a form, and I'm going to be giving the ID of a form as book form. Inside of this, we'll have all of our form elements. So I will say form group. Let's create the first element. So the first element that we want is the title of the book. So for that, we need a label and we need a input element. So let me create a label first. So we need a label for title. Let me name this as title, and I'm going to be needing a input element of type text and ID of title, and I'm going to be using bootstrap class of form control. Alright, later on what I need are same two input boxes for author, the name of the author, and the ISBN number. So I'm just going to be copying this and making changes to the label as well as input. So let me quickly do that. Alright, so I have the ISBN number as well. I will also need a submit button for this form. So let me go ahead and copy and paste this, and instead of labels and inputs, I will just have the input. So for this, I will say type of submit. I don't need an ID because it's a form submit. The value will be submit. The classes are form control. Excellent. So let's save this and see how this looks. I'm going to be opening this up in the live server. So this is how the application looks, and which is fine. But what I want in this case now is I want this form on the left hand side, and on the right hand side I want to be able to show all of our books that we have stored in the local storage. So let's go and add that as well. So like I said previously, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be adding a table instead of lists. So what I will do is I will add another div, I'll add a class of column small. We'll have another div inside of this, and inside of this I will have table. The class I'm going to be using is for Bootstrap, and I'm going to be creating the header row. So I will say table head and scope of column, because I want them in a separate column. Again, this is a Bootstrap property. I'll say title, and I'll one for each one of them: the title, author, and the ISBN. All right, author and the ISBN. I want one more column for the delete button. So if the user wants to delete their completed books, the button should be displayed. So I'll create a blank one. I will leave this as blank. Okay. Now we will define the table body here with an ID of book list because we need to access this from the JavaScript, and I'm going to keep this empty. So we'll be appending the uh, the table data inside of this. So let me make this a bit better and attach the script like here as always in the source of main.js. Alright, let me save this and see how this looks. So perfect. So I have the form on the left hand side and I have this table structure on the right. So let's go ahead and write some JavaScript to see how this will look. So let's begin writing the JavaScript for this application. But before we do that, I want to tell you that this is going to be a different project. So we'll be approaching this problem a bit differently than we did for the to-do list. In this project, we're going to be using classes and constructors. Do you remember what classes and constructors are? We covered this in session 3. So if you're not familiar with them, I strongly urge you to test those out first, revisit that session, make sure you understand them, and then we can move on in this project. So we will be creating 3 classes. One is for the book. So we are going to be storing the book as a JavaScript object in the local storage array. We're also going to be separating out form and function. So form is the user interface and the function is the storing of the books. So we're going to be creating 3 classes. So let me write these classes down first. So I'll say class book UI and class storage. Okay. Now the book is a JavaScript object that we will be storing in an array, and we're going to be storing this array inside the local storage. So what are the elements of this object? So if you look at our index.html file, we have 3 key input boxes. One is the title, one is the author, and one is the ISBN. So to store this, we are going to be creating a JavaScript object, and for this we're going to be needing a constructor. Okay, so every time when the user submits a new book, we're going to be creating an instance of this class, and we're going to be storing that. So let's create the constructor first. The 3 things that we need are title, author, and the ISBN. Okay, and I'm going to be creating a JavaScript object, so I will say this.title, and I'm going to be assigning to the title that we are going to be passing inside this constructor. So I'll say title. Same way for the author and the ISBN. Okay, so the way we want to create an instance of a book is when the user submits a form, right? So when the user submits a form, we have to capture that click event. It's the same way we did in the to-do list project, but in this case, we are going to be adding the event listener on the form itself rather than one submit button, right? So if you go back to the HTML file, scroll a bit up. So we have a form with an ID of book form. So I'm going to be attaching a event listener for submit. So submit is a event that we listen to on the form element, right? So let's go back and capture this first. So I'll just create some space down here, and I would say document dot get element by ID, and book form, because that is the ID that we have given to the form. And I'm going to be adding event listener. The event I'm listening to is submit, and I'm going to be passing in a function with the event. Okay, so inside of here, what we need to do is we need to access the values that the user has entered in these input elements. So let me create variables to store them. So I will say variable title equal to document dot get element by ID. Do you remember what the ID was for the title? So it was title, it's author for author, and the ID for ISBN is ISBN. So let me quickly write these down. Dot value. I'm going to just copy and paste this and change the values in here. So we have author, the ID is author, and we have ISBN with the value of ISBN. Okay, excellent. Now we have three things that are required to create a book object. So what we will do is we will create an instance of that class, the book class, and the way we do is we will say constant book equal to new book, and we'll pass in the title, author, and the ISBN. So we'll say title, author, and the ISBN. Okay, great. Now we need to store this inside our local storage, right? So if you remember what we did in the local storage in the last project, we only had two functions that were key. One was to store the item and one was to get the item. So we will write the functions for these two particular functions that we need to perform inside the storage class. So let me go ahead and write these real quick. So the first thing is to add the book list, right? Add the book inside the local storage. So let me create a function. I'm going to be using static here. I'll just say add book, and I'm going to be passing in the book that we just created. So book just created right here. Okay, so in here again, now in this case, what if the book already exists in the local storage, right? So we'll have to first get the existing books in the local storage, and based on that we have to decide if the book already exists, and attach it to that existing book list rather than creating new one. So we'll have to create the get books function first before we do this add book function. So let's do that. Again, it's the same thing that we did in the to-do application. We are just doing a bit differently in this, right? So, oops. Okay, so in here, I will create a blank array. So I'll say var books equals blank array. And you remember what we did last time? So we used a conditional statement like if to see if the book already exists in the local storage. So I'm going to be passing the local storage.getItem directly into this if block and see if it's null. So I'll say if local storage.getItem, and the key I'm going to be storing this is as books, okay, is not equal to null. So if it is not null, then give me the existing books, right? So books equals JSON dot parse, and I'm going to be passing in the local storage. Okay, great. Now in here, this code can be improved a bit better, like how we did it in the last project. So make sure you take a look at this code as well as that code and see any improvements that you can come up with. And I'm going to be returning the books. Okay, all right, great. Now we have defined the getBooks function. We will get these books here. So I will say variable books equals, so we have to access the getBooks, and the way we do that is by using the class name and the function. Okay, so the way we do it is we will say storage dot getBooks. All right, excellent. Now we have got the array, right? And we'll push our new book inside of this. So we'll say push. Okay, something wrong here. Let's say books.push, I'm sorry. Books.push, and we'll pass in the books. Okay. Once we have done this, we'll update the local storage. So do you remember what was the method that we used to update the local storage? It was local storage dot set item, and the key that we used was books. And let's save this as a string instead of an array. So we'll have to use JSON.stringify. All right, great. Now let's save this and see how this looks. But before we do that, let me look if everything is correct right here. So we have created a book, but we haven't passed it inside the add book function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be calling that function. So remember what class is it in? Yes, it is in storage dot add book, and inside here let's say add book. Okay, let's save this and see how this looks. I'm going to be right clicking here and opening up my developer tools to see if I have any errors. So I have one error here. Again, this is a jQuery error. We can ignore that for the time being. Let me go to the application. Let me look at the local storage. There's nothing in here. So let me add the first book right here. So what book should we add? So let's add a book called Mastery by Robert Greene. I'm going to be entering a fictitious ISBN. So I will say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to be clicking on submit. So I clicked on submit and I did not get anything here. So let me reload this. Okay, so looks like we have some sort of error here. Let's go back and see what we missed. Okay, so let's see what we did wrong here. Okay, so you see the mistake here. I've set this as books and I've used book. So let me save this and go back and see. So let me add the same titles here. Let me add the ISBN. Let me go to the application and see the local storage. So let me submit this book right here. And there it is. We have the book and we have stored this as a JavaScript object. So if we expand this, you can see author, the ISBN, as well as the title. All right. So if you notice one thing, this form actually captures the default event. So it actually clears out everything once it's submitted. So we want to avoid that. So let's add one more book in here. We'll add again Robert Greene's book. So I think it is called 48 Laws of Power. and the author is Robert Greene. We'll add a fictitious ISBN, so let's add 6789 and submit it. You notice here it clears everything out and it jumps. So what we can do is we can prevent it by default. My mistake. Prevent it by default. We'll go back, and before we submit the book, we will add event.prevent default. Okay, great. The next thing we have to do is we have to display the existing books onto the DOM, right? So for that we have created a separate class of form, right? So we go back. Let me actually close this storage for time being, and let's work on this UI class. Okay, so in this UI class, what we will do is we will write a function to update the table data. So if you remember, in the index.html, we have created table. We have created the table head and the table body. Now inside the table body, we have to append a new table data, right? So we'll go back and we'll write a function saying add book to the list. And inside we'll again get the book. I will first get the list with the list of books. So let me go back and see what the ID I have put in there. So the ID that I have is book list for the table body. So I will create a variable of list equals document.getElement by ID, and the name, the ID is book list. All right, now I have to create a new row. So the way I do this is by creating constant row equals document.createElement, and in here I'm going to be creating table row. Okay, and I'm going to be attaching the table data for this row, right? So I will say row.innerHTML equals, and here I will start adding one table data at a time. So I will say table data, and the way I can do this is I can use the object properties. So I'll say book.title, right? Because we are attaching a book here, and we close the table data, and I'll be adding for author and the ISBN as well. So I'll say author and ISBN. Let me remove this extra space right here. Save this. And now we have to append this list to the existing row, right? So what we need to do is we have to, we have to append the row to the existing list. My mistake. So we'll say list dot append. Now this will be a child of that, the row will be a child of this list. So we'll say append child, and we'll say row. Great, excellent. Now that we have done this, what we need to do is we need to create an instance of this UI and call this, right? So the way we do this, we'll go back when we submitted the book. So we'll go back Let me remove this extra space right here. And let me first create an instance. So I will add a instance of UI equals new UI. Okay, and I will call that function. Remember what function we wrote just now? So we wrote the function of add book to the list. And we will say UI dot add book to the list, and we'll pass in the book. Okay, let me save this and see how this looks. Okay, so this did not work. Let's see why it did not work. Okay, I see the mistake here. We have added this just in the submit button, but we also have to add it when we get new books, right? So get the books from the local storage. So what we will need to do is we'll need to write a new function here just to display the books. So let me create a function here real quick, right, to get all the updated books. So I will call this function as static display books. And inside here, let me get the books first. So I will say var books equals storage dot get books. And for each book, what I have to do is I have to create a new UI element. Right? So let's do this. Let's say books, since it's an array, and for each of these books, since now we are dealing with array of objects, right? So we cannot rely on traditional for loop. I mean, we can use traditional for loop, but for each is much better and much faster. So we'll use for each, and we'll pass in a function. And for each book, we'll create a new UI instance. So I'll say constant of UI equals new UI. And I will just call in that function of add books to the list. So I'll say UI dot add book to the list, and I will pass in the book. Right? Excellent. So let me save this and go back. So what seems to be the problem here right now? Why is this not working? Do you have any guesses? Right, so we created the display books function, but we never called it, right? So let us go back and see where we have to call this display book function, right? So we have to call the display book function when all of the HTML page is loaded, right? So we have to listen to a different event in here. We can write this function anywhere at the end of our JavaScript. So we can call it in here. So we can say storage dot display books. I think it's called display books. And this will still run. But we have to make sure that all the other DOM elements have been loaded. So I'm going to be adding an event listener to the entire document. And the event that we are going to be listening is DOM content loaded. Right, so let me actually comment this. You're going to be using this again. So I will add an event listener. And inside here, I'm going to be listening to an event that DOM content has been loaded. And I'm going to be passing in storage.displaybooks. Let me save this, remove this semicolon, and now see how this looks. There we go. So we got the books to be displayed on our UI. So let me add a few more books in here. So let me add a book called Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson. Yeah, I'm not really sure on the spelling here, but I'm gonna add a fictitious ISBN. Submitted. There we go. We added a new book. Let's add a few more books. Excellent, excellent. Now, what we need to do is we need to be able to remove the books that we have read. So we have to create a delete button here, right? So we created a separate column in here just for the delete button, and we haven't written the delete button. So let me go back to the not the HTML but the JavaScript and add this delete button right there. Okay, let's go back. Let me scroll up. Do you remember where we are appending the book to the list? Right here, right? So we will need to add a delete button right here. So let me go ahead and add this button. So I'm going to be adding a new table data element, and I'm going to be adding a button. So I'm going to be using the anchored tag here instead of the traditional button, since we have already used the button. Let's use something different here. So let's say href. It doesn't go anywhere, so anchor tag usually needs a reference. And I will use a class of bootstrap, so I'll use button danger, and I will just say x, just to delete it. Say anchor close and the table data close. All right, excellent. Oh, I realized my mistake here. I did not add a semicolon here. Okay, great. All right, so let us go back and see if this has been added. Great, so we already have a button. This looks a bit ugly, but you can always improve on it. Now we have to attach event handler of click for this button. So do you remember how to do that? We already covered this in the last project. Right, so let's go ahead and see how we can do this. All right, so for attaching the event listener here, we're going to be approaching this problem a bit differently than how we did in the last project. So instead of attaching event listener for each one of these buttons, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be attaching an event listener on the table data itself, right? So let me show how this will look. Let me first close this up and make some space. All right, so in here, I will say document dot get element by ID, and in here I'm going to be calling the table data, right? So the table data here is the book list. So I will say book list, and I will add an event listener, and the event I'm listening for is click. In here I'm going to be writing a function, and I'm going to be passing in the event that we just captured. All right, great. Now we have to think about how we can remove each one of the element when the delete button is clicked. Okay, so in the previous project, how we did was we looked at the array and we looked at the position, and that's how we deleted it. But here we have a bit better advantage. If you go back and see, we have the ISBN. Now ISBN is a unique number that is given to each book. So this is a unique number that we can look for, and then we can delete it from our local storage. So how will we access this ISBN, right? So when we click on this button right here, we need to be able to somehow figure out what the ISBN number for this particular book is. And the way we do this is we will have to access the immediate neighbor of this button, the ISBN, get the number, look up that number in the local storage, and make sure we delete it. So how we may do this? Let's go back and see it. So in here, let me first get the target to see if I'm getting the event capture. So I already have passed event in this function. So let me first log this out to see if this works perfectly. So I'll say console.log and event. Let's see if this looks fine. So let me go to console. All right, so the event is logged here. So that's great. Now what we have to do is we have to check the target and traverse to the parent element. So we'll have to traverse back to the parent element of this entire element. So if we go back and we check the target, so the target we already have right now is the anchor tag. Since we clicked that, we have to look for its parent element. So the parent element will be the book list. So let me scroll down here. So parent element. So the parent element is the table data, like we had the book list. Inside the table data, we will look at the previous element sibling. So the previous element sibling for this particular element is the ISBN, right? So I'll scroll down, and I'm looking for the previous element sibling. Right, so the previous element sibling is another table data, and inside of here, I'm looking for the ISBN. So if you notice this is a content that is being displayed on the DOM. So this will be inside the text content property. So if we scroll down here and look at the text content property, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is precisely what we need to access. Okay, I know this is a bit complicated, and it's a much more complicated than what we did last time, but the purpose of this complication is to make sure you understand how to traverse between these DOM nodes. So think of this path right here. So we selected this element, we attached an event listener to it. So on the click event, what we would do is we will move our pointer to the parent first. So if you remember the tree, so we have to go to the parent to go to the sibling, right? So we'll move to the parent. So parent is the table data itself, right? Move to the table data, then look at the sibling of that table data. So the table data here is the ISBN, and we'll get the text content out of it. So let us go back and access this. So the way we can access this is by e.target.parent element, and the previous element. I'm sorry, it was the previous element sibling, not just the previous element. And the content that we're looking for is the text, so it was under text content. Let's save this and see what this logs out. So if I click on this, I should get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I click on this, I should get the ISBN. Same way right here. Now what we can do is we can pass this inside a function, the ISBN, and that function will be solely responsible to look up the book of this ISBN in the local storage and delete it. So let's write this function down. Okay, so let's call this function as remove. Okay, and now since this is a property of the storage class, it's wise to write this inside the storage because we'll be dealing directly with storage, right? So the reason we use the storage class is to make sure all the methods that are pertaining to storage will be stored in this class. So let me actually move this there. We go there, we close this up, and add a new function here. I'll remove this, and I will add static remove. And what are we removing? The ISBN, right? Excellent. So now we have to traverse the local storage, look for that particular book, and make sure that it is deleted. So let's get the books first. So we'll say var books equals the get books method. That will give us all the books. And now you'll traverse through the list of books by using the for each function. For each function, book, and here we go. Now in here we are going to be looking for the index as well. So we have to make sure we delete that specific index, right? So what we will do is I will pass in the index of the book inside the array, and I will see if the ISBN for that particular book matches the ISBN that we are passing in. So I'll say if book.isbn is equal to ISBN. Okay, and we remove it from the element, sorry, from the array. Remove this element from the array. So we'll say books.splice and the index. Okay, great. Now once we have done this, we have to update the local storage. So let me say local storage dot set item. Remember the key was for this, it was books, and I'm going to be updating this array. So we'll say JSON dot stringify books. All right, excellent. Now let's call this method on the click event for the delete button, right? So in here, instead of logging this out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be passing this inside the method itself. So let's first store this inside a variable. So I will say variable ISBN equals, and I will get all of this from here. Let me remove this log, it's not necessary. We'll save this, and I will pass this ISBN inside that function. So do storage dot remove an ISBN. Excellent. Let me see if we haven't missed anything. Yeah, this looks good. This looks fine. Let us see if this works or not. So let me save this. Go back to the application, and let me remove this last book right here. All right, so the book was deleted. Same thing with Steve Jobs. Yes, the book is being deleted. Now all we have to do is make sure we update this DOM once the book is deleted from the local storage. Do you remember how to do that? We already covered this in the previous project. Before you follow with me along on this, try to figure this problem out, because we have already covered this in the previous project. You can watch the next few minutes of this video to understand how I'm solving it, but I would strongly encourage you to solve it on your own. All right, so could you solve this? If not, it's fine. This is a bit complicated. So what we will do is we will make sure that we get the target. So if you scroll down and see, we already have e.target. So when the button is clicked, so we have that button within our reach. What we will do is we will delete the entire table data row for that particular book. So we have to delete multiple things in here. So if you scroll back, we have to delete all of this within one single click, right? So this is a function of UI. So I'm going to write this method inside of UI class. So let me actually close this and write a new method here for deleting the book. So I'll say delete book, and I'm going to be passing in the book. Okay, now what I'm going to be passing in here is the target itself. So if I go back, we have the event target. So let's save this first inside a variable called book, and I will say e.target. If you're curious to know what this is, let's log this out. Say console.log book. I'm saving it. Let's go back and see what it looks in the log. So if I press this, this is the target. So this was the target that I clicked on, and I need to access the class of this, right? So with the class of this, I'm going to be deleting everything that is before it. So each and every parent element for this particular section, this particular table data will be deleted. So I'm going to be accessing the class, making sure if the class is button and button danger, and then deleting all of the elements inside of it. So let me go back. Let me remove this, and I'm going to be creating an instance of the UI object. So I'll say var UI equals new UI, and I'm going to be calling in UI.remove, and inside of here I'm going to be passing in the book. Save. Is it UI.remove? So let me look at the function that I just wrote. Oh, it's delete book, it's not remove. So let's change this to delete book. Okay, great. So in here I'm going to be checking if the class name is of button and button danger. So we have already passed in the book. So let's see if the class name for this book is of button and button danger, and we're going to be removing all of the parent elements associated with this. So oops, I forgot to open and close the brace for the if block. So I will say book dot parent element and its parent element and remove it. Let's save this and see how this looks. So I accidentally deleted all of the cache of my browser. So I'm going to be adding a few more books to test it again. So we have mastery. Let's add a few more. And let's see how this looks now. I'm not going to be adding more, but we have a problem here. This is not clearing up when the form is submitted. So we'll deal with that in just a second, but let's see if the delete button works. So it looks like it works. Let me check inside the local storage. So yes, the previous book, 48 Laws of Power, was deleted. Let me delete this book as well. Great. So this is just awesome. So now I've noticed one problem that is very annoying and I don't like it, is that this the information here stays on once you submit it. So what I need to do is I need to clear this out. So I'll write a function inside the UI class to delete uh, all of these input fields once the form is submitted. So let me go back and write this. I'll say clear fields, clear the input fields, and I will get each one of them. So each one of them, what's the ID for each one of them, do you know? So their title, author, and the ISBN. So let me first write this document dot get element by ID, title dot value, and I'm going to be setting this as blank. Okay, I'm going to be setting this for the rest of the two. So this is author and this is ISBN. So I'm going to be calling this function once we submit the form. So scroll down and we submitted the form. Okay, so here's the form submission event, and after we have added the book, or after we have made changes, I'm going to be clearing this out. So I'll say UI, since we already defined the instance of this class, I'm sorry, and I'm going to be calling clear fields. Great. Let me go back and see if this works. So I'm going to be adding some different books now. I'll say Meditations, Marcus Aurelius. Let me add some fictitious ISBN. Alright, so it works. So it added a blank blank object in here. So we need to add a check to see if we're not adding extra or empty objects inside our database. That is one mistake that we don't want to have. Can you think of any ways where we can see if it'll work? I'll leave it up to you to see how to fix this problem. Could you solve this problem? I'm not going to solve this problem right now, but I will give you a small hint. You have to do a validation on these input elements. So what you have to do is check if any of these fields are empty. If they are not empty, then only you add them to the database. So what you will have to do is you'll have to go back inside of your submit event function, and you have to make sure that none of these have empty values. If they have an empty values, you'll have to show user the error saying that they have empty values, and if not, then you have to add them one at a time in the local storage. So this is it. You'll find the updated code on my GitHub page in case you get stuck in this form validation. Form validation is important. Please make sure you pay attention to it. And let us go back to the slides. So again, in the review, we already manipulated the DOM. We also updated the DOM in real time. And this concludes this project. So what we did differently than the previous projects, especially the last project with the to-do list. If you can list down the differences between that project and this project and understand how we did things here differently, then you will get a better understanding of how to use the concepts of JavaScript that we learned in session 3, session 4, as well as session 2. Okay, so here are a few resources for your review. You can dive deeper into them, understand how to manipulate the DOM. I have just scratched the surface here with the JavaScript and DOM manipulation, but there are so many things that you can learn, and the DOM or the HTML standards are changing often. So is JavaScript. Both of these technologies are evolving constantly, so I strongly encourage you to rely on these resources more and more to keep yourself updated. So here are a few JavaScript courses that you can take. Node.js. Node.js is a backend language, and the rest of the frameworks that you see, Angular, React, and Vue, are all the front-end frameworks. And here's another follow-up course that I take. It's with jQuery, JSON, as well as Ajax. So thanks for being patient with me. I hope you learned a lot, and this concludes our session. Take care. Bye-bye. Hey guys, congratulations on completing the Introduction to JavaScript Programming. My name is Kaustubh Gharge, and it's good to have you here. This is very good that you have completed this course. In this course, we covered various topics. We covered the basics of JavaScript programming. We understood the lexical structures, the expressions, types, strings, variables, and the other fundamentals of programming. We also covered the conditional statements and loops, and we covered the built-in functions that JavaScript offers, as well as we wrote some new functions. Okay, we also understood the difference between a web design and web development. And by now, you must be feeling pretty confident about your skills as a JavaScript developer. Okay, so we implemented our JavaScript skills by building a few projects. So the first project we focused on was a simple calculator where you had the 4 basic arithmetic functions: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. In the second project, we utilized our skills for HTML5, which we learned in the previous course, or if you might have learned earlier, in which we use the local storage in combination with JavaScript to store the user to-dos, as well as build a book reading list. So congratulations on completing this class successfully. And if you want, you can take more follow-up courses. I recommend taking intermediate JavaScript with jQuery, JSON, and Ajax. And after that, you can focus more on the frameworks such as Angular, React, or even Express and Node.js. So thank you for taking your time and have a good day.